slides at the end, Ted, but I'm not sure I'll go over them. So if I end it, you don't have to continue on. Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today, those of you who are in person as well as online. It's such a pleasure for me to be here today. My name is Meyer, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Neurology at UC Davis Health. I'm a social psychologist by training, so I'm not a clinician, but I do research in Alzheimer's disease, in cognitive impairment in older populations, with a particular focus on Asian American, Vietnamese American populations. And a lot of my research has been looking at experiences of early life adversity and trauma and how they relate to dementia in the Vietnamese population, and also very interested in Asian American health disparities in general. So I'm happy to be here today at ACC, and my presentation is on aging and dementia, and really how we can intervene to protect our brain. And how we can ensure brain health. And this is an important topic because everybody is aging, we're all aging, living longer, and so we want to figure out what we can do to prevent cognitive impairment, to reduce our risk for memory loss if it's possible. So that's this title of my talk. I'm going to go ahead and go through the presentation and then have room at the end for questions. So you can feel free to jot down any questions you have or put them in the chat and we can answer them at the end. So it's hard to hear?
It's hard to hear.
Oh, okay. I'll try to project and talk a little bit louder. Okay. This is an outline of my talk for today. I'm going to be talking about modifiable lifestyle factors. So these are things that we can do to change or to alter our lifestyle to protect our brain health. And I'm going to talk about, towards the end of my talk, a brand new research study at UC Davis called the U.S. Pointer Study. This is a study that's currently ongoing at UC Davis, and we're recruiting from the community, and so it's a really exciting time, and I hope to be able to tell you a bit about that at the end. So going on to the next slide. So what is dementia? A lot of you may know this already, but dementia is a general, broad term. It's an umbrella term, and it refers to a clinical syndrome, and it indicates a decline from a previous level of ability in many areas of thinking. So it can be decline in your memory. You may not remember things like you used to. A decline in language. You may not remember how to come up with certain words or phrases in a sentence. There's also a decline in visual spatial abilities. You may not remember how to get to a familiar place that you've gone to for many years. There's also a decline in executive function. So these are things like problem solving, maybe cooking a familiar meal that you cooked for many years, you've forgotten how to do that. So those would be indications that overall there is dementia, and especially if this is something that impacts your activities of daily living. If it impacts your ability to take care of yourself, and it gradually gets worse, this is in general what dementia is. And the biggest risk factor for dementia is age. So we know on this graph, you can see here, that as you get older, the prevalence of dementia gets higher. So it starts off when you're in your 70s at about almost 5 to 10% as you get in the upper 70s, and it gradually increases to almost 45% in your 90s. So age is the biggest risk factor for dementia. And the most common type of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease is one type of a disease that causes dementia. And here are some facts from the Alzheimer's Association on dementia. So on Alzheimer's, we know that it's the 6th leading cause of death in the US, more than breast and prostate cancer combined. Dementia currently costs the nation almost $300 billion, so it's a very expensive disease because it requires a lot of care. People who have dementia eventually get to a point where you can't take care of yourself. So for example, I'm a caregiver for my mom with dementia. She has Alzheimer's, and so it takes, time off of work, doctor visits and things like that really increases the cost of taking care of someone with dementia. And we know that more than 16 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's. And unfortunately, not a lot of seniors or older adults receive regular memory checkups. And as you get older, this is something that is becoming more common in primary care visits to screen for cognitive impairment. In addition to age, there are other risk factors for dementia. So we know that someone with a family history or genetic predisposition might be more likely to have dementia if they have the ApoE gene. Cognitive inactivity, not staying socially or cognitively active, might increase your risk for dementia. A lack of social engagement. So the fact that you're all here today in person or on Zoom means that you're engaging with a topic, you're engaging maybe with other people, and that's a positive, and I'll talk about some of the science behind that. Chronic stress, depression, physical inactivity, poor diet, poor sleep, these are all risk factors for dementia. Smoking, low education, traumatic brain injury, hypertension, diabetes, these are all risk factors for dementia. So if you have one of these factors, it increases your risk. And it's currently estimated that up to 40% of cases of dementia are preventable. So that is the good news, is that even though as we age, our risk for dementia increases, there are things that you can do, lifestyle, behavioral factors that might reduce your risk. And that's one of the positive things that's come out from this literature. So what can you do to reduce your risk of cognitive and decline and dementia? This is what everybody wants to know. It's scary for people as they get older, especially for someone like me who has a family history of Alzheimer's. I want to know, what can I do now to reduce my risks? And 3 of the things that I'm going to talk about today are exercise, cognitive stimulation, and nutrition. And I'll make sure to make these slides available after the talk so that you can get a copy of them if you want. So those are the 3 things that I'm going to highlight. So one of the most common recommendations for adults in general and older adults is physical activity, physical exercise. There have been a lot of research studies that have shown an association between exercise and cognitive function. And some of these are observational studies. And observational studies are, if you look at different groups of people, you look at people who exercise versus people who don't, researchers find that those who exercise have better cognitive function than those who don't exercise. But really, the gold standard for determining whether an intervention can actually cause something else are intervention trials. Those are randomized controlled trials where you randomly assign half of the people to the exercise intervention and half the people don't get the intervention. And that's when you can determine that it's not, just the people who are healthy who want to exercise, that they're being randomly assigned. And that's the gold standard to tell whether something is effective or not. And in these randomized control trials, they've shown improvements in memory, in thinking, and brain structure of people who are physically active. And the typical exercise protocol, we always get a lot of these questions about, well, what do I have to do? What's the least amount I have to do to exercise? And the typical protocol is 40 to 50 minutes of brisk walking, so walking quickly to get your heart rate up, 4 to 5 times a week. So that's the typical exercise protocol or some other moderate intense exercise. And the research has shown that it's not only individuals who are at risk who benefit, it's those who are at risk and also who have normal cognitive impairment that everybody tends to benefit. And it may be that those with genetic risk for Alzheimer's, that is those who have the ApoE4 gene, actually show the greatest benefit from exercise. And again, just the recommended guideline, 150 minutes of moderately vigorous exercise a week. So how can you tell if your exercise is moderately vigorous? This is a informative table, and I'm going to lean in a little bit so I can see some of the font here. But moderate exercise is in that middle column right there. And this is walking very briskly, for example, 4 miles per hour. It's heavy cleaning. It's mowing the lawn, bicycling. And again, these are just things that are getting your heart rate up. So it's not just walking, taking a stroll casually. Moderately vigorous exercise actually makes it harder for you to talk to someone, to have a conversation if you're exercising at this level. And then you can see on the right column there what vigorous exercise is. It's things like hiking, jogging, and things like that. So now we know that exercise, and with exercise, that probably has the highest level of scientific evidence of all the things that I'm talking about, nutrition, being socially, cognitively active. But I'm going to highlight nutrition next. So what are some things that we can eat to keep our brain healthy? And I don't know if a lot of people have heard about the Mediterranean diet. Have any of you in this room heard about the Mediterranean diet? No? This is actually something that was observed in the 1970s. They observed that individuals who lived in Mediterranean countries, so countries like Italy, Greece, that these individuals had lower rates of cardiovascular disease compared to individuals in other countries. So they just made this observation that these people seem to be healthier. And so they started looking at their diet. And this is the Mediterranean diet right here. You can see on the bottom, or the foundation of the diet, is staying socially, cognitively active. And then you can see here eating lots of fruits, vegetables, and then less in terms of meat and alcohol. And so the bottom of the pyramid is really the foundation of the Mediterranean diet, a diet that's high in fruits and vegetables. And again, in randomized clinical trials, when they assign people to either eat foods consistent with the Mediterranean diet or not, they found that people who adhered to the Mediterranean diet had slower rates of cognitive decline. That even though everyone tends to have some cognitive decline, that people who adhered to the Mediterranean diet had slower rates of decline. And so this was something that was very interesting. And another diet that built off the Mediterranean diet is called the Meyer diet. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Meyer diet, but it's very similar to the Mediterranean diet. But it also features other dietary components like eating nuts, lots of leafy greens, berries, raspberries, blueberries. And they found that individuals who adhered to the Meyer diet had slower cognitive decline. And actually, the difference in the rate of cognitive decline was equivalent to being 7.5 years younger for people who adhered to the Meyer diet. And the researchers also found that high adherence to the Meyer diet reduced risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And so the Meyer diet, again, is very similar to the Mediterranean, but also contains the additional components of eating lots of nuts, berries, and leafy greens. So these two diets seem to suggest that there are things that you can do, things that you can eat to reduce your risk for memory loss. And the next thing that I'll talk about is exercising your brain. So when you think about your brain, you can think about, the whole adage, use it or lose it. If you're constantly engaging your brain, that has been shown to be effective for reducing memory loss. And I'll show you some of these studies that have come out. There's been some studies that suggest that people who have higher levels of education have reduced risk for Alzheimer's disease. And so that is the more schooling that people receive. It's associated with reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease. People who have higher levels of occupational complexity, it's associated with a reduced risk of Alzheimer's. So occupational complexity is when you think about how often you might have to work with other people, how often you might have to deal with data, how complex your job is. The more complex it is, the more it's associated with better reduced risks of Alzheimer's. It's also been shown that people who work into older age also have lower risk of Alzheimer's disease, so the longer that you work. And finally, individuals who more frequently engage in mentally stimulating leisure activities throughout their lifespan have a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. And again, so it's engaging on a mentally and cognitively stimulating level. And just to show you what studies have found, there was a research study called the Experience Core. And this was a study that was done in Baltimore where they randomly assigned older adults to work in elementary schools as volunteers. They were reading tutors, or they worked in the library, they supported teachers in the classroom, and they found that individuals who were in the Experience Core had better cognitive function than those who did not, that they had increased brain volume and increased brain activity. So again, there's something about volunteering, being engaged with other people, with data, with information, increases your cognitive ability and reduces your risk for memory loss. So it may be beneficial to engage with other people, is the main point. So here are some other examples of cognitively stimulating activities that you can participate in. You could, learning how to speak a new language. So for example, Vietnamese is my first language, but because I grew up in the US, my Vietnamese is not that great, but it's something that I'll try to, read a really simple article in Vietnamese or speak Vietnamese every now and then, because that engages my brain. It makes me really think and have to work hard to do that. So learning to speak a new language, reading a book, learning how to play an instrument, going to see a play, doing a crossword puzzle. These are things that you can do to engage yourself. And engage your brain. Taking a class as you are today. And so how can you motivate yourself to reduce risk? I think a lot of people know what they should do. We know we should exercise. We know we should eat well. We know we should engage our brain. But how can you motivate yourself to do that? And one of the things that I'll suggest is really engaging with a lot of the great research that's going on around us, really. And participating in a clinical trial, if that's something that sounds interesting to you. And I'll talk a little bit about what the US Pointer study is. A clinical trial, does anyone here know what a clinical trial is? And until I got into research, it was also unclear to me. It's a research study that tests if a treatment is safe and effective. So all the drugs that you see, at Rite Aid or CVS, those drugs have all gone through clinical trials to make sure they're safe and effective. And so that's what a clinical trial is. It randomly assigns people to getting a certain drug or intervention and seeing if it's safe and effective. People in clinical trials can withdraw at any time. And I just put a little blurb of an article that was published in the Sacramento Bee a couple of years ago about how UC Davis was chosen to join a national study to participate in this clinical trial called US Pointer. And before I talk about US Pointer, I just want to highlight how important it is to have diversity in clinical trials. So we know that individuals from different racial and ethnic populations are less likely to participate in clinical trials. And one review actually found that only 1% of volunteers recruited into Alzheimer's disease trials were Latino and 2% were African American. And there was really probably not much data about Asian Americans at all. It's very crucial, actually, that we increase the diversity in clinical trials, because if not, we don't know if certain interventions or drugs are effective for everybody. And if an intervention like US Pointer is effective in reducing your risk for memory loss, we want to make sure that it's effective for everybody and not just a select few. And so that's what we're hoping to do with US Pointers, increase the diversity in our clinical trials. And as I mentioned here, we know very little about Asian American Pacific Islander participation in research trials. We do know that in clinical research projects that are focused on Asian American Pacific Islander populations, that less than 1% of the NIH budget was focused on Asian Americans. And so it's really important that for all these barriers that AAPIs have to participate in research, that we do whatever we can to engage groups that typically aren't enrolled in clinical trials, to make sure that they have an opportunity to participate if they want. And so now I'll talk about what's going on at UC Davis at the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, which I'm a part of. And the study or the intervention is called the US Pointer study. And the goal of US Pointer is to ask ourselves whether or not healthy lifestyle changes can improve and protect brain health. That's the major goal of US Pointer. If we intervene in people's lifestyles and help them to be healthy, does that reduce their risk for memory loss? So it's testing 2 healthy lifestyle programs that includes exercise, a healthy diet, staying socially and mentally active, and seeing whether or not those 3 elements of the intervention can reduce our risk for memory loss. And if it does show, if it is proven to be effective, we'll have an intervention that can hopefully help a lot of people have a reduced risk for memory loss. And the great thing about it is that there's no drug that's involved. It's really just changing to a healthy lifestyle, which is, can sometimes be more challenging than just taking a pill, right? But there's no drug involved in US Pointer. People who are involved in US Pointer are located throughout the country. Again, this is like the first of its kind. In Northern California, it's happening here in Sacramento, and UC Davis is a part of it. The intervention's also happening in Chicago, in Houston, North Carolina, and Rhode Island. So across the country, we're going to be enrolling 2,000 individuals into the US Pointer study. It's funded by the Alzheimer's Association. And what are the benefits of joining? So individuals are enrolled into the intervention for 2 years. And during the intervention, they meet in structured teams to help them to be motivated to engage in exercise and diet. They get regular lifestyle coaching and health monitoring. There's team meetings where they can meet with other people who are in the same group to help them to be motivated to exercise, to adhere to the diet. And there's no cost to join right now. We're currently recruiting at UC Davis for 400 individuals. We currently have over 250. So we're recruiting for 150 more individuals, and they're compensated for their time. So who are we looking for? So US Pointer is enrolling individuals who are 60 to 79 years old. So we're looking for people who are not regular exercisers because we want to be able to make some impact in their lifestyle. So, they can't be like a marathon runner, for example. And they have to have other risk factors that put them at high risk for Alzheimer's. So they might have a family history, they might have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or blood sugar. And so these are the individuals who we're currently recruiting here at UC Davis to be a part of this trial. And this is the information. If individuals are interested, they can contact us at pointerstudy@ucdavis.edu or call the phone number. Again, it's a 2-year trial, so we are enrolling through February of next year. And even if you are not interested or not eligible for the trial, we really want to make sure that people in Sacramento and locally hear about this study so that they have the opportunity to participate if they want to do something to help their lifestyle. So you can spread the word about US Pointer. You can tell people in your network about US Pointer. And there's really a lot of other studies that we're doing at UC Davis, and we just want to again, engage as diverse of a population as possible. So I'm going towards the end of the talk here. And so let's just recap. We know that, as I mentioned earlier, the number of individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias is growing. That number is increasing every day. There's currently, unfortunately, no cure for Alzheimer's disease, but there is hope. And that hope, as I mentioned, is that 40% of dementia cases are preventable. And it has to do with changing lifestyle habits and behaviors that might potentially reduce the risk for memory loss. So what can you do now is you can join the study, contribute to understanding dementias in diverse communities. You can spread the word, or you can connect us with other groups who might be interested, maybe a local church or community organization who is interested in finding more about studies that we're doing here at UC Davis. So with that, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to take questions, but these are some of the questions that I have for the audience as you think about this presentation. So what questions do you have about participating in research? What did you learn that was new or interesting that you hadn't thought about before? And how does this information make you feel about brain health and aging? And here I've just put, if you're interested in learning more about our Alzheimer's Disease Center, you can Google UC Davis Alzheimer's Disease Center and learn more about how to participate in research. So with that, just want to thank you so much for your time. Yeah, and I'll go ahead and take questions, either live in person or via chat. Any questions?
I'd like to ask now, you said something about that you would be giving us some information.
Yes.
Repeat the question.
And I was wondering if the information would include something about the Mediterranean and mind diets.
Yes.
My husband and I are thinking about going on a diet. We definitely have to lose some weight. We need to be healthy. And so I was wondering now if there was a strict adherence to, say, the Mediterranean diet, we would probably lose weight rather than having to go on another type of diet.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll just repeat it so the folks online can hear. So the question was about getting information about the Mediterranean and the Mind diet, and so I'm happy to share the information with you. If you want to put down your email address, I can email you some information. But yeah, I'm sure there's a, probably like a weekly suggestion of recipes or meals that you can make that are that would adhere to the Mind diet or the Mediterranean diet. So I'm happy to share that with you. I'll just,
Thank you.
yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great point, because I think that's something that we can do that doesn't take a ton of work, is to think about what we're eating, maybe change things a little bit, less meat, more fruits and vegetables. I think that's pretty like the low-hanging fruit, pardon my pun, about, being able to address like dietary things. Yeah, thank you.
A related question about diets, because the Mediterranean came on the scene several years ago, but I've heard also the Okinawan diet is supposed to be also good for you, but being Asian, I feel, a little closer to my comfort food would be nicer than olives, I say,
Right.
which is foreign to my body.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, is there any, for being Asian, anything it's similar? The closer I get to my comfort food, the more I'm inclined to stay with it, I say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll repeat the question for the folks online. So the point was made that individuals from Asian American cultures and other cultures as well might not think about the Mediterranean diet as something that's like a common diet, and might have a hard time adapting your diet to the Mediterranean diet. And I feel the same way, because, I feel like growing up Asian, it's just common to eat rice all the time. Like you have a rice with every meal, because otherwise it's not filling, right? Like, so I totally agree that some of these diets, you have to think about what's culturally, syntonic with you, what works for you. And I think in Asian American cultures, there's a lot of great green leafy vegetables that you can have. Bok choy is one of them. That's a common, Asian staple. Other green leafy vegetables I think are good for you, and also are part of the Mind diet, Mediterranean diet. So I think vegetables are a little bit easier. I think that there are some fruits Berries are not as common. I think I agree in Asian American culture, but I think I have to, like for me, I just have to make like a conscious decision to have berries because I know that it's not something that's natural for me necessarily. But I've tried to incorporate more berries into like my oatmeal. Again, not a super like common Asian American diet, but I think it's just like a conscious effort to try to adapt as much as you can, right? And maybe like less rice, less fish sauce, for example.
Keep the principles of what the Mediterranean diet or guidelines, but basically say substitute or replace with Asian vegetables or whatever as much as you can. At least it's a starting point.
You're right, exactly.
Starting
Yeah,
point.
exactly. A starting point is good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. I'm going to read a couple of these questions online. What is considered not regular exercise? If I don't walk more than certain number of minutes or days or a week. So I think this question is probably in regards to U.S. pointer eligibility. So I think there's an extensive like screening questionnaire that people will do with you if you call the phone number. They'll go through all the questions and tell you what's considered regular exercise. So if you're like jogging 3 to 4 times a week, you're probably a regular exerciser. So I don't know what the exact stipulations are, but if you're interested and if you just reach out to our phone number, I'm sure that they can tell you more about like what's considered not like a regular exerciser. So hopefully that helps. How do you determine if you have MCI or dementia? So that's a great question. A lot of times people who have concerns about memory will, I suggest going first to your primary care physician and asking for them to do a cognitive screening to see if you might have some problems with memory. So the first place is go to your primary care physician. And then your PCP might recommend that you go see a neurologist or a neuropsychologist who can then do an extensive assessment. They'll give you some cognitive assessments that ask, about your memory, your executive function. They'll do a full physical exam to make sure there's nothing that might physically be causing you to have some problems with memory. And so that's what I would say is, to go to your PCP first, to ask for a cognitive screen. And then if there's indications that there might be some problems, your PCP can recommend that you go to a neurologist or a neuropsychologist who can do a more extensive cognitive assessment, a physical exam. They might order some imaging to be done to be able to help you find out the answer.
I had a question about being with a team for this Davis study. Would you be going to Davis to meet with people?
That's a great question. So we have teams meeting throughout the areas. So we have teams in Davis, we have teams in Sacramento, all over Sacramento. It just depends on where people live, and we're trying to do our best to make sure that people in like the same geographic area can meet together. So there's multiple teams that are happening. But thank you for the question. Yeah, the UC Davis is actually located in Sacramento. UC Davis, the health system, is located in Sacramento. And then the college campus is located in Davis. But we do have teams meeting in Davis at the Veterans Memorial Center, I believe, and then teams throughout the Sacramento area. Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you so much for your time. Again, you can feel free to reach out to me or check out our UC Davis Alzheimer's Disease Center website for other additional information. Thank you.